Hello everybody. Something a bit different for this video. When I posted an earlier video about some mead I'd made, a few people seemed quite interested. So I thought what I'd do is do a walkthrough of how I go about making my mead. So it's a home brewing video. It's a little bit longer than the last few, but have a look, see what you think. You might find it interesting. Right, so stage one, strangely it might seem, starts off in the bathroom. But I've just got to sterilise some equipment. I'm doing it in the bathroom because it's easier to rinse the demijohns under the bath tap, there's more room. So I've got a funnel, a couple of airlocks, and a jug. Nothing too high tech at this stage, but it's nothing high tech at all, to be honest. Sterilising solution, sodium metabisulfite, good sprinkling of that. On contact with the water, it releases sulphur dioxide, which is your basic bleach that you can use on food items. Sodium metabisulfite is also used as a food additive, as a preservative. It's known as E223. Now, what you can do as well is add some acid to the mixture, in this case citric acid, and what that does is it releases a whole shitload of sulphur dioxide. There'll be clouds of it and I might start coughing, but it does make your sterilising solution extremely powerful. So I'm just going to clean out the demijohns and then we'll catch up with you for section 2. Okay, so stage 2, we move to the kitchen, and first job is to get the yeast on. I've not used these particular yeast sachets before, but generally speaking any decent high alcohol wine or champagne yeast should give you 15 to 16% alcohol based on 4 pounds of honey per gallon. I'm going to make 2 gallons today. The last batch was just a single gallon, and what that meant was that when I racked it off I had to bottle it straight away, because if I put it back in the demijohn to mature there would have been a large airspace at the top as a result of siphoning it off the sediment. So I'm going to make 2 with the idea that when it comes to racking off the sediment, I can fill 1 demijohn right to the top, leave that to mature, and should still have a few bottles to drink. So we've got sachet yeast in each cup, warm water, bit of sugar. I'm just going to put those out of the way, let them start festering. And we'll get on to the honey. 4 jars a gallon. The big pan just about lets me do a full gallon in one go, so just wait for the kettle to boil. Now the idea here is to dissolve the honey in the smallest amount of hot water you can, because that way when it's ready to go in the demijohn you've got a bit of room to add cold water to speed up the cooling down process before you can put the yeast in. waiting for the kettle to boil. And we'll pick up again when there's something to see. Okay, so we've got the honey dissolved in water. It's about 3.5 litres altogether. And now we're heating it gently. You want to get it up towards boiling point, but you don't want to boil it. And the reason for that is that honey isn't just a sugary liquid. It does contain a lot of other things, such as waxes, and by heating it, it can bring the wax out and it forms a scum on the top. This can be anything from a thick grey scum to a fine white layer, depending on how heavy the waxes are in that particular batch of honey. On this one, it's not looking as though we're going to get a big heavy grey scum. But either way, it needs to be skimmed off because it will make the finished product cloudy. I'll just lift the camera over. I don't know if you can see, we're getting like a fine white layer there. I don't measure the temperature, so there is still time for the grey scum to rise, but it is looking as though it might not on this batch. So it's just a case of skimming that off. What I do is just rinse the metal spoon under a cold tap, because then when you put the cold spoon into the scum, it clings to the back of the spoon, and that way you don't lose as much of your honey solution. Just give it another stir, we don't want it sticking or getting too hot. Turn the gas off a little bit. It does seem like there's not a lot of scum on this batch. This is cheap supermarket honey. And obviously being a natural ingredient, it's going to vary from year to year, from supplier to supplier, from jar to jar even. Put the gas back on, and we'll just give it a blast, make sure we can't get anything else to rise out of it. I'll come back to you for the next stage. Now, one thing I'm going to do, because this is cheap supermarket honey, I'm going to do a little experiment, and I'm going to add some elderflower cordial, just to try and boost the flavour a little bit, and with a bit of luck, give it that elderflowery smell. Don't know if it'll work, but I can't see it doing too much harm if it doesn't. So now just need to leave that to cool and go and get a demijohn so we can get it into the glass. So there's the first gallon. The liquid's still quite hot, so I stood the demijohn in a couple of inches of hot water, give it a rinse out with hot water, just to avoid the possibility of thermal shock on the glass. The mead solution came up to about here. I've put a couple of jugs of cold water in, but it's still too hot for the yeast. So I've left a bit of room for the yeast and a bit more water to top it up. And then that basically is that. So I'm going to crack on now with the second gallon. And I'll just show you the finished product in the next bit. Okay, so the final part is to sling the yeast in. Ideally this should have cooled down to blood temperature. It's a little bit warm, but it should be alright. I'll just tip the camera so you can see plenty of head on that yeast. So we'll literally just chuck it in. Just get a bit of warm water to rinse the cup out. And a little bit of yeast nutrient. Sling it all in. Get an airlock. Rinse the sterilising solution off the outside of the airlock. Bosh that in there. And repeat with the other gallon. There again we have the nice head on the yeast. Slap it in. Rinse the cup to get all the yeast out. Little sprinkling of yeast nutrient. And slap that in there. Airlock. And that should be that. I have left quite a bit of space at the top of the demijohn because I've not used this yeast before. I don't know how lively it's going to get. So I'll top it up in a couple of days once we see how bonkers the yeast is. I have had yeast come right up and out of the demijohn in the past and it's a complete pain to get it all cleaned up. So best to leave a bit of room at first and then I'll top it up in a few days. That should, once it gets going, ferment at a rate of perhaps 2 bubbles a second for about a month, then slow into 1 bubble a second or 1 bubble every other second for another 2 or 3 weeks, and hopefully we should have some nice mead. So, I hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.